Sarah Martinez had always known the military base would be different from civilian life, but nothing prepared her for the intensity of her first day as a civilian contractor at Naval Special Warfare Command. The 28-year-old engineer clutched her temporary badge and followed the escort through endless corridors lined with photographs of fallen heroes and mission patches that told stories of courage in distant lands. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training compound as Sarah made her way to Building 7, where she would be working on classified communication systems. Her engineering degree from MIT and her security clearance had landed her this prestigious contract, but walking among these elite warriors made her feel like she was stepping into a completely different world. As she approached the main training facility, the sound of boots on concrete echoed through the hallway. A group of Navy SEALs emerged from what appeared to be a briefing room, their faces showing the weathered determination that came from years of dangerous missions. Sarah pressed herself against the wall to let them pass, noting how they moved with a purposeful efficiency that seemed almost choreographed. Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison was among them, though Sarah didn't know his name yet. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had led men through impossible situations and brought them home alive. His dark hair was cropped short in military regulation style, and his green eyes held the kind of intensity that came from making life-and-death decisions in split seconds. Sarah's escort, a young petty officer named Collins, pointed toward a security checkpoint ahead. "Ma'am, you'll need to go through additional screening before entering the classified areas. It's standard procedure for all contractors." The security station was manned by Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez, a stocky man with forearms covered in tattoos that spoke of deployments to places most people only saw on the news. He had been working base security for 3 years, ever since an injury in Afghanistan had ended his career as an explosives specialist. Rodriguez took his job seriously, perhaps too seriously according to some, but recent security breaches at other installations had everyone on edge. "Contractor badge," Rodriguez said without looking up from his paperwork. Sarah handed over her temporary credentials, watching as he scrutinized them with the thoroughness of someone checking for enemy infiltrators rather than processing a routine entry. The metal detector beeped softly as Sarah passed through, but Rodriguez frowned at his screen. "Step back, please. Empty your pockets completely." Sarah complied, placing her phone, keys, and a small multi-tool on the plastic tray. The multi-tool, a gift from her father who had been an Air Force mechanic, contained several small implements including a tiny knife blade that she used for precision work on circuit boards. "This is prohibited," Rodriguez said, holding up the multi-tool. "No blades of any kind in the classified areas." "I understand," Sarah replied. "I can leave it here or take it back to my car." But Rodriguez was already shaking his head, his expression hardening. "I need to conduct a full search. Security protocol requires inspection when prohibited items are discovered." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "What kind of search?" "Complete physical search. You'll need to remove your outer clothing for inspection." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah looked around the security station, noting that it was an open area with glass windows facing the main corridor. Several personnel were walking by, including some of the SEALs she had seen earlier. "Here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In front of everyone?" Rodriguez's expression didn't soften. "Security protocols don't make exceptions for location. If you want access to classified areas, you submit to the search." Sarah felt trapped between her professional obligations and her personal dignity. She needed this job, needed to prove herself in a field dominated by men who often questioned whether women belonged in these environments. But the thought of undressing in front of strangers, of being reduced to a security risk rather than the skilled professional she was, made her stomach turn. "This doesn't seem right," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Surely there's a private area where this can be conducted?" "The protocol is clear," Rodriguez insisted. "Remove your jacket and shirt for inspection, or forfeit your access privileges." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the buttons of her blazer. Around her, the normal sounds of the base continued. Footsteps, conversations, the distant sound of training exercises. But in her world, everything had narrowed to this moment. This choice between her career and her dignity. She had gotten 3 buttons undone when a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Rodriguez, what's the situation here?" Lieutenant Commander Harrison had returned, his tall frame filling the doorway of the security station. He took in the scene with the quick assessment of someone trained to read tactical situations, his eyes moving from Rodriguez's aggressive posture to Sarah's obvious distress. "Sir, conducting a routine security search on a contractor who was carrying prohibited items," Rodriguez replied, straightening slightly but maintaining his authoritative tone. Harrison stepped closer, and Sarah could see the controlled anger in his expression. "A routine search that requires her to undress in a public area?" "Security protocols, sir. No exceptions for anyone." "I'm familiar with our security protocols, Rodriguez. I'm also familiar with basic human decency and military regulations regarding the treatment of civilian personnel." The tension in the small space was palpable. Sarah stood frozen, her blazer still partially unbuttoned, caught between two military men who seemed to be engaged in a battle of wills that had nothing to do with her, but everything to do with how power was exercised in this environment. Harrison's voice dropped lower, carrying the kind of authority that came from leading men in combat. "Rodriguez, step outside now." "Sir, I'm just following." "That's an order, petty officer." Rodriguez's jaw tightened, but he couldn't ignore the direct command from a superior officer. He stepped out of the security station, leaving Sarah and Harrison alone in the small space. Harrison turned to Sarah, his expression softening slightly. "Ma'am, I apologize for what just happened. That was completely inappropriate and against regulations." Sarah's hands shook as she began buttoning her blazer back up. "I just want to do my job," she said quietly. "I don't want any trouble." "You're not the one causing trouble," Harrison replied firmly, "and no one has the right to humiliate you in the name of security. That's not what we're about here." Through the glass window, Sarah could see Rodriguez pacing outside, his face flushed with anger. Other personnel had begun to take notice of the commotion, and she realized that word of this incident would spread quickly through the tight-knit community of the base. Harrison picked up her multi-tool from the security tray. "I'll hold on to this during your visit and return it when you leave. That satisfies the security requirement without compromising your dignity." As he spoke, Harrison did something that Sarah would remember for the rest of her life. He slowly removed his military cap, revealing hair slightly flattened from wearing it all morning, and gave her a crisp, respectful salute. The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to everything she had experienced in the past few minutes, that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. In that moment, she understood that she had witnessed something significant, not just a disagreement between military personnel, but a fundamental difference in how people chose to exercise their power and authority. The news of the security station incident spread through the naval base faster than Sarah had anticipated. By the end of her first day, she could feel the weight of curious stares and hushed conversations that stopped when she walked by. Some looks held sympathy, others carried the harder edge of judgment that questioned whether she belonged in this environment at all. Sarah spent the evening in her temporary quarters, a small room in the visiting personnel barracks, replaying the events over and over in her mind. She had come here to prove herself as an engineer, to work on cutting-edge communication systems that could save lives in the field. Instead, she found herself at the center of a controversy that threatened to overshadow everything she hoped to accomplish. Lieutenant Commander Harrison faced his own challenges that evening. As soon as word reached his commanding officer, Captain Robert Walsh, Harrison was summoned to provide a detailed account of what had transpired. Captain Walsh was a career naval officer who had worked his way up through the enlisted ranks before earning his commission. He understood both the importance of security protocols and the delicate balance required when dealing with civilian contractors. "Jake, I need to understand exactly what happened," Captain Walsh said, leaning back in his chair behind a desk covered with deployment schedules and personnel reports. "Rodriguez is claiming you interfered with a legitimate security procedure." Harrison sat straight in the chair across from his commander, his expression calm, but his voice carrying conviction. "Sir, Rodriguez was conducting what he called a security search, but it violated every regulation we have regarding the treatment of civilian personnel. He was demanding that Ms. Martinez remove her clothing in a public area, with no privacy protections and no female security personnel present." Captain Walsh frowned, making notes on a legal pad. "What was the basis for the search?" She had a small multi-tool with a blade, standard contractor equipment that should have been handled by simply securing the item until her departure. "And Rodriguez's response when you intervened?" Harrison chose his words carefully, knowing that his answer could affect Rodriguez's career. He seemed to believe that security protocols gave him unlimited authority. I don't think he understood the legal and regulatory boundaries that govern how we interact with civilian contractors. The truth was more complicated than Harrison was willing to admit. Rodriguez had always been aggressive in his interpretation of security procedures, sometimes crossing lines that made other personnel uncomfortable. There had been complaints before, though none as serious as this incident. Harrison suspected that Rodriguez's injury and subsequent reassignment to base security had left him feeling powerless, and he compensated by wielding what authority he did have with excessive force. Meanwhile, across the base, Rodriguez was meeting with his own supervisor, Chief Petty Officer Martinez, trying to justify his actions. The irony that his supervisor shared a surname with the civilian contractor was not lost on anyone involved. "Rodriguez, help me understand your thinking," Chief Martinez said, his weathered face showing the strain of dealing with a situation that could result in formal complaints and potential legal action. "You had a contractor with a prohibited item. Standard procedure is to secure the item and document the incident. Why did you escalate to a physical search?" Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His forearms, covered with tattoos from his deployment to Afghanistan, bore witness to a different kind of service, one where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. But this wasn't Afghanistan, and Sarah Martinez wasn't an enemy combatant. "Chief, we've had security briefings about the increased threat level. Command has emphasized that we can't take any chances with potential security breaches," Rodriguez said, his voice defensive. "I was following the protocols as I understood them. The protocols that require public humiliation of civilian contractors." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was doing my job." Chief Martinez leaned forward, his expression serious. "Your job is to maintain security while upholding the values and regulations of the United States Navy. What you did today fell short of both requirements." The investigation that followed would consume the next several days. Sarah found herself called to provide detailed statements about the incident, each retelling forcing her to relive the embarrassment and confusion she had felt. The base's legal officer, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Williams, conducted the interviews with the thoroughness of someone who understood that the outcome could affect not just the individuals involved, but the base's relationship with civilian contractors and potentially the Navy's reputation. Lieutenant Commander Williams was known throughout the base for her fairness and attention to detail. A former surface warfare officer who had transitioned to the legal field after completing law school through the Navy's education program, she approached each case with the understanding that military justice was about more than punishment. It was about maintaining the standards that allowed the military to function effectively. "Ms. Martinez," Lieutenant Commander Williams said during one of their interviews, "I want you to understand that what happened to you was not acceptable, and it doesn't represent the standards we expect from our personnel." Sarah appreciated the words, but she was beginning to wonder if her presence on the base was causing more problems than her engineering expertise was worth. "I just want to focus on my work," she replied. "I don't want to be the center of a controversy." "I understand that, but we have an obligation to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Your willingness to come forward about this incident helps us address a serious problem." The investigation revealed that Rodriguez had misinterpreted recent security briefings, taking general warnings about increased vigilance and translating them into authorization for more aggressive search procedures. It also uncovered a pattern of behavior that suggested Rodriguez had been struggling with the transition from active combat operations to base security duties. Dr. Jennifer Foster, the base's psychologist, was brought in to evaluate Rodriguez's fitness for his current position. Dr. Foster had extensive experience working with veterans transitioning from combat roles to support positions, and she understood the complex emotions that could drive inappropriate behavior. Rodriguez is dealing with what many veterans face when they move from high-stakes operational environments to routine assignments, Dr. Foster explained to Captain Walsh during her assessment briefing. The sense of purpose and authority that comes from life or death decision-making can be difficult to replace. Some individuals compensate by over-exercising whatever authority they do have. The psychological evaluation didn't excuse Rodriguez's behavior, but it provided context that would influence how the Navy chose to address the situation. Rodriguez wasn't a bad person. but he was someone whose service-connected injuries had left him struggling to find his place in a peacetime military structure. Harrison found himself walking a careful line during the investigation. His intervention had been necessary and appropriate, but he was also aware that his actions had effectively ended Rodriguez's career in base security. The military was a community where reputations mattered, and Rodriguez would likely never fully recover from the incident. Sarah, meanwhile, was discovering that her expertise was genuinely needed and appreciated by the personnel she was supposed to work with. The communication system she was helping to upgrade would directly impact the safety and effectiveness of SEAL operations around the world. Her colleagues in the engineering department treated her with the respect due to a professional, and she began to see that the security station incident was an aberration, not a reflection of the base's overall culture. As the investigation progressed, Sarah also found herself drawn into conversations with other women on the base, both military personnel and civilian contractors, who shared their own experiences of navigating a male-dominated environment. These conversations helped her understand that her experience, while particularly egregious, was part of a larger pattern of challenges that women in military settings often faced. The investigation concluded with a formal reprimand for Rodriguez and his reassignment to a position that didn't involve direct interaction with civilian personnel. Harrison received a commendation for his appropriate intervention, though he took no pleasure in the recognition given the circumstances that had prompted it. For Sarah, the conclusion of the investigation marked the beginning of her real work on the base, but it also left her with a deeper understanding of the complexities of military culture and the ongoing challenges of creating environments where everyone could serve with dignity and respect. 3 weeks after the security incident, Sarah had settled into a routine that allowed her to focus on the technical work she had come to the base to perform. The advanced communication system she was upgrading represented years of development and millions of dollars in research, designed to give SEAL teams reliable contact with command centers, even in the most challenging environments. Her workspace in Building 7 was a maze of computer terminals, testing equipment and prototype devices that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Sarah found herself working closely with Chief Electronics Technician David Park, a quiet man whose expertise with battlefield communications had made him invaluable to special operations units worldwide. The encryption algorithms you've developed could revolutionize how we maintain secure communications in hostile territory, Chief Park explained as they tested a new radio system. The ability to automatically switch frequencies while maintaining encryption integrity could save lives. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that her work had direct, practical applications. Unlike her previous job in the private sector, where she had worked on consumer electronics, every line of code she wrote here could mean the difference between a successful mission and a disaster. Lieutenant Commander Harrison often visited the communications lab, not to check on Sarah's progress, but because his operational experience provided valuable input on how the systems would perform in real-world conditions. Their professional relationship had developed naturally, built on mutual respect for each other's expertise. "The real test will be when we take this equipment on deployment," Harrison said during one of his visits, examining a ruggedized tablet that could coordinate with satellite networks and ground-based radio systems. "In the field, everything that can go wrong usually does." Sarah had learned to appreciate Harrison's perspective. His questions weren't meant to challenge her work, but to ensure that the systems would function when lives depended on them. She began to understand that behind the quiet intensity that had impressed her during their first meeting was a leader who cared deeply about bringing his people home safely. The base itself had begun to feel less intimidating as Sarah learned to navigate its unwritten rules and protocols. She discovered that the military's emphasis on structure and hierarchy, which had initially seemed rigid and impersonal, actually created a framework where people could work together effectively, despite coming from vastly different backgrounds. Chief Park had grown up in Los Angeles, the son of Korean immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities in America. His path to the Navy had been motivated by a desire to serve the country that had welcomed his family, and his expertise with electronics had made him indispensable to special operations units. "My parents still don't completely understand what I do," Chief Park confided to Sarah during a late evening of testing. They know I work with computers and radios, but the operational aspects of special operations are beyond their experience. Sarah found these conversations valuable, not just for the personal connections they created, but for the insights they provided into the diverse motivations that brought people to serve in the military. Everyone she met had a story about why they had chosen this life, and those stories helped her understand the culture she was now part of. The incident with Rodriguez had created an unexpected opportunity for broader discussions about how civilian contractors were integrated into military operations. Captain Walsh had initiated a series of briefings designed to clarify the roles and responsibilities of both military personnel and civilian contractors, ensuring that future interactions would be governed by clear guidelines and mutual respect. Sarah found herself invited to participate in these briefings, both as someone who could provide the civilian perspective and as an expert whose technical knowledge was relevant to the discussions. She discovered that many of the military personnel were genuinely interested in learning how to work more effectively with civilian experts. The reality is that modern military operations require expertise that we can't always develop internally, Captain Walsh explained during one of these sessions. We need civilian contractors who understand cutting-edge technology, and we need to create an environment where they can do their best work. The briefings also addressed some of the cultural misunderstandings that could create friction between military and civilian personnel. Sarah learned that some of the formality and structure that had initially seemed cold was actually a way of showing respect and maintaining professional boundaries in a high-stress environment. During this period, Sarah also began to understand the broader context of the work being done on the base. The SEAL teams she occasionally saw in the hallways were preparing for deployments that would take them to dangerous places around the world, where they would risk their lives to protect American interests and allies. Harrison shared some of these realities during their professional conversations, always being careful not to reveal classified information but helping Sarah understand the importance of the systems she was developing. The communication equipment you're working on will deploy with teams, operating in environments where calling for help isn't always possible, he explained. Your encryption protocols could prevent enemy forces from intercepting our communications and using that information against us. This knowledge added weight to Sarah's work, but it also created a sense of purpose she had never experienced in her previous career. Every successful test, every improvement in system performance, every bug she identified and fixed contributed directly to the safety of people who were willing to risk everything in service to their country. As her second month on the base began, Sarah noticed that her presence was no longer unusual or remarkable. Personnel nodded to her in the hallways, included her in technical discussions, and treated her as a valued member of the team rather than an outsider who needed special accommodation. The transformation wasn't complete. She still encountered occasional awkwardness, and the lingering effects of the Rodriguez incident continued to surface in unexpected ways. Some personnel remained overly formal in their interactions with her, as if afraid that normal professional communication might be misinterpreted. But the overall trend was positive, and Sarah began to see how her technical expertise was contributing to a larger mission that extended far beyond the confines of the base. The communication system she was helping to develop would eventually be used by special operations forces around the world, providing them with capabilities that could mean the difference between success and failure in critical missions. Chief Park had become not just a colleague but a friend, someone whose technical knowledge complemented her own and whose operational experience helped her understand how theoretical capabilities translated into practical advantages in the field. The work we're doing here will influence military communications for the next decade, Chief Park told her as they completed another successful test of the new encryption system. Your contributions are going to have a lasting impact on how special operations forces communicate in hostile environments. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that her skills were being used for something meaningful, something that went beyond corporate profits or consumer convenience, to touch the lives of people who risked everything in service to others. The relationship between Sarah and Harrison had also evolved into something more complex than simple professional cooperation. They shared a commitment to excellence and the understanding that their work had serious consequences. But there was also a growing personal respect that went beyond their official roles Harrison's intervention during the Rodriguez incident had established him as someone willing to do the right thing even when it was difficult, and Sarah's dedication to her work had proven that she belonged in this environment despite the challenges she had faced. As they worked together on testing procedures and operational requirements, both began to realize that their professional partnership was built on a foundation of shared values and mutual respect that extended beyond the immediate demands of their jobs. 2 months into her assignment, Sarah received an unexpected request that would test both her technical skills and her ability to work under pressure. Lieutenant Commander Harrison approached her workstation early one morning with an urgency she hadn't seen before. "Sarah, we need your expertise on something time-sensitive," he said, his voice carrying the controlled tension that suggested a developing situation. "Can you come to the briefing room?" Sarah followed him through corridors she had never seen before, deeper into the secure areas of the base where access was limited to personnel with the highest clearances. The briefing room was filled with maps, satellite photographs, and communication equipment that represented the nerve center for ongoing operations. Captain Walsh was present, along with several other officers Sarah didn't recognize. Chief Park was there too, his usually calm demeanor replaced by focused intensity. On the main screen was a satellite image of what appeared to be a remote mountainous region, marked with various symbols and grid coordinates. "Ms. Martinez," Captain Walsh began, "we have a team deployed in a location where standard communication protocols have failed. They're operating in terrain that's interfering with satellite communications, and local weather conditions are making radio contact sporadic at best." Sarah studied the technical briefing materials spread across the conference table. The deployed team was using an earlier version of the communication system she had been upgrading, and the environmental challenges they were facing highlighted weaknesses that her improvements were designed to address. "The enhanced frequency hopping protocols you've developed could solve their communication problems," Harrison explained, "but we need to implement them remotely without being able to physically access their equipment." The challenge was significant. Sarah would need to develop a software update that could be transmitted to the field team's equipment using the limited communication windows available, and the update would need to work perfectly on the first attempt. There would be no opportunity for debugging or corrections once the team received it. "What's the timeline?" Sarah asked, already mentally cataloging the work that would be required. 72 hours, Captain Walsh replied. "After that, weather conditions in their area will make any communication attempts impossible for at least a week." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Somewhere in those mountains, a team of American military personnel was operating with compromised communications, dependent on her ability to solve a technical problem she had never encountered before. The next 3 days became a blur of intensive work, collaboration, and testing. Sarah found herself working around the clock, sustained by coffee and the knowledge that her efforts could directly impact the safety of the deployed team. Chief Park proved invaluable as a collaborator, his understanding of field conditions helping her anticipate problems she might not have considered. The temperature variations in that region could affect the radio frequencies, Chief Park noted during one of their late-night sessions. "We need to build in compensation algorithms that account for atmospheric changes." Sarah had never worked under this kind of pressure before. In her previous job, missed deadlines meant delayed product launches or disappointed customers. Here, failure could mean lost lives and mission failure with potential international implications. Harrison checked on their progress regularly, providing operational context that helped Sarah understand the constraints and requirements her solution needed to meet. She learned that the deployed team was conducting a time-sensitive mission that required precise coordination with other military units, making reliable communication essential for both mission success and personnel safety. "The team leader is Master Chief Petty Officer Williams," Harrison explained during one of his visits. "He's got 20 years of experience in special operations. But even the best operator can't complete a mission without the ability to coordinate with support elements." As Sarah worked on the software modifications, she began to understand the human dimension of the technical challenges she was solving. The frequency hopping algorithms she was refining weren't just code. They were lifelines that would allow isolated military personnel to call for help, coordinate with allies, and complete missions that served American national security interests. The testing phase proved particularly challenging. Sarah needed to simulate the environmental conditions the deployed team was experiencing, including atmospheric interference, temperature variations, and the specific characteristics of their communication equipment. The base's testing facilities were sophisticated, but recreating real-world field conditions required creativity and improvisation. "We can use the environmental chamber to simulate the temperature extremes," Chief Park suggested, "and the RF testing laboratory can generate the kind of atmospheric interference they're experiencing." Sarah found herself learning about aspects of military operations she had never considered. The deployed team's communication needs weren't just about talking to headquarters. They needed to coordinate with aircraft providing support, communicate with local allied forces who might not speak English, and maintain contact with extraction teams who would retrieve them when the mission was complete. Each of these requirements demanded different technical capabilities, and Sarah's solution needed to address all of them, while operating on equipment that was already strained by challenging environmental conditions. On the second day of her sprint to develop the solution, Sarah encountered a problem that threatened to derail the entire effort. The frequency-hopping algorithms that worked perfectly in laboratory conditions created interference patterns when implemented on the specific radio equipment the deployed team was using. The resonance characteristics of their antenna array are creating harmonic distortions, she explained to Harrison and Chief Park during an emergency briefing. The frequencies that should provide the clearest communication are actually generating the most interference. Harrison frowned at the technical diagrams spread across the table. "What are our options?" Sarah had been dreading this question. "I can modify the algorithms to avoid the problematic frequencies, but that will reduce the overall effectiveness of the system. Or I can try to develop a completely different approach, but that would require starting over with less than 24 hours remaining." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. A partially effective solution might be better than no solution at all, but it could also create a false sense of security that led to poor decision-making in the field. Chief Park spoke first. "What if we approach this as a two-phase implementation? Deploy the modified algorithms now to restore basic communication, then develop a more comprehensive solution for future deployments." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for Chief Park's practical wisdom. His suggestion provided a path forward that balanced the immediate needs of the deployed team with the longer-term goal of developing superior communication capabilities. Harrison nodded approval. "Can you implement the modified version in time for tonight's communication window?" Sarah checked her watch and calculated the work remaining. "Yes, but it will be close. I'll need Chief Park's help with the testing protocols." The final 12 hours before the transmission deadline became an exercise in controlled urgency. Sarah and Chief Park worked with the focused intensity of surgeons performing a life-saving operation, checking and rechecking every line of code, every parameter setting, every aspect of the implementation that would be transmitted to the field team. Harrison remained in the communications center throughout the night, monitoring reports from the deployed team and coordinating with higher headquarters about the status of Sarah's solution. His presence provided both moral support and a constant reminder of the human cost of failure. As dawn approached, Sarah completed the final testing sequence. The modified communication system worked within acceptable parameters, providing the deployed team with significantly improved communication capabilities while avoiding the interference problems that had made their original equipment unreliable. "It's ready," Sarah announced, her voice hoarse from fatigue but steady with confidence. "The system will give them clear communication on at least 3 different frequency bands, with automatic switching if one band becomes compromised." Harrison activated the transmission protocol, sending Sarah's software update across thousands of miles to a team of American military personnel operating in one of the most remote and dangerous places on Earth. For the next hour, everyone in the communications center waited in silence, knowing that the success or failure of 3 days of intensive work would be determined by whether the deployed team could establish reliable contact with their headquarters. Finally, the radio crackled to life with a clear, strong signal that carried the voice of Master Chief Williams from halfway around the world. "Base, this is Team 7. Communication systems are functioning perfectly. Outstanding work, over." The success of the emergency communication fix established Sarah's reputation throughout the Naval Special Operations community in ways she hadn't anticipated. Word of her ability to solve critical technical problems under extreme time pressure spread beyond the base, reaching headquarters units and other installations where similar challenges were being encountered. Within days of Master Chief Williams' successful transmission, Sarah found herself receiving requests for consultation on communication problems from SEAL teams preparing for deployments around the world. The modified frequency hopping algorithms she had developed weren't just a one-time solution. They represented a fundamental improvement in how special operations forces could maintain contact in hostile environments. Captain Walsh called Sarah to his office a week after the successful mission support, and she was surprised to find several visitors present when she arrived. Admiral Patricia Reynolds, the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, had made an unscheduled visit to the base specifically to meet the civilian contractor, whose technical expertise had prevented a potential mission failure. Ms. Martinez, Admiral Reynolds said, rising from her chair as Sarah entered the office, "I wanted to personally thank you for your contribution to our operational capabilities. The solution you developed under such challenging circumstances exemplifies the kind of innovation we need to maintain our tactical advantages." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the recognition. Admiral Reynolds was a legend in special operations circles, the first woman to command Naval Special Warfare Command, and someone whose operational and leadership accomplishments had earned respect throughout the military community. "Thank you, Admiral. I was just doing my job," Sarah replied, trying to maintain professional composure while processing the surreal nature of the situation. "Your job, as you describe it, saved a mission and potentially saved lives," Admiral Reynolds continued. "But more importantly, your work has identified improvements we can implement across our entire communication infrastructure." The meeting that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her civilian career. Instead of corporate executives, focused on profit margins and market share, she found herself briefing senior military leaders about technical capabilities that would directly impact national security operations around the world. Chief Park had been invited to participate in the briefing, and his operational experience proved invaluable in translating Sarah's technical innovations into language that highlighted their practical benefits for field personnel. The enhanced encryption protocols Ms. Martinez has developed will allow our teams to communicate securely, even when operating in environments where enemy forces have sophisticated signal intelligence capabilities, Chief Park explained, using charts and diagrams to illustrate the technical advantages. Harrison was also present, providing the operational perspective that helped the senior leaders understand how improved communications would enhance mission effectiveness and personnel safety. The reliability improvements alone justify implementing these upgrades fleet-wide, Harrison noted, but the enhanced security features provide advantages that could prove decisive in contested environments. As the briefing progressed, Sarah realized that her work was being considered for implementation throughout the special operations community, affecting thousands of personnel and hundreds of missions annually. The responsibility was both exciting and daunting. Admiral Reynolds had specific questions about the scalability of Sarah's solutions and the timeline required for widespread implementation. How quickly could we modify existing communication equipment to incorporate these improvements? Sarah had been thinking about this question since the successful field test. The software modifications can be implemented relatively quickly, but optimizing performance for different equipment configurations will require extensive testing. I'd estimate 6 months for full implementation across all special operations units. And the training requirements for personnel who will be using the upgraded systems? Minimal, Chief Park interjected. Ms. Martinez designed the improvements to be transparent to the end user. Operators won't need to learn new procedures, but they'll benefit from significantly improved performance. The meeting concluded with Admiral Reynolds authorizing the expansion of Sarah's contract and the allocation of additional resources to accelerate the implementation of her communication improvements. Sarah would be working with a larger team of engineers and technicians, but she would retain responsibility for the core technical development. As the senior officers departed, Captain Walsh asked Sarah to remain behind for a private conversation. "Sarah, I want you to understand what just happened," Captain Walsh said, settling back into his chair. "Admiral Reynolds doesn't make unscheduled visits to praise contractors. Your work has attracted attention at the highest levels of the Naval Special Operations community. Sarah felt the weight of expectation that came with such recognition. I appreciate the confidence, Captain, but I hope this doesn't create unrealistic expectations. I'm just one engineer working on specific technical problems. Captain Walsh smiled, an expression that transformed his usually serious demeanor. That's exactly the attitude that makes you effective. But don't underestimate the impact of your work. Master Chief Williams and his team completed their mission successfully, in large part because you gave them the communication capabilities they needed. The expanded project brought new challenges and opportunities. Sarah found herself working with a team of military and civilian technical experts from bases across the country, coordinating the development and testing of communication improvements that would affect the entire special operations community. Her new workspace was significantly larger, equipped with advanced testing facilities and staffed by specialists whose expertise complemented her own. Lieutenant Commander Harrison had been assigned as the military liaison for the project, a role that required him to coordinate between Sarah's technical team and the operational units that would use their innovations. The challenge isn't just developing better technology, Harrison explained during one of their planning meetings. We need to ensure that improvements can be implemented quickly when teams are preparing for deployment, and that the technology remains reliable under the extreme conditions our people face in the field. Sarah appreciated Harrison's perspective, which helped her understand the practical constraints that shaped how military technology was developed and deployed. Unlike consumer electronics, which could be updated frequently and replaced regularly, military communication equipment needed to function reliably for years in environments that would destroy civilian technology in days. The expanded project also brought Sarah into contact with other parts of the military community she hadn't encountered before. She worked with Air Force specialists who developed communication systems for special operations aircraft, Army engineers, who created equipment for ground-based special operations units, and civilian contractors from major defense companies whose expertise spanned decades of military technology development. Dr. Michael Chin, a senior engineer from a major defense contractor, became one of Sarah's key collaborators. His experience with military communication systems provided historical context that helped Sarah understand why certain design decisions had been made and how her improvements fit into the broader evolution of military technology. The communication challenges our special operations forces face today are fundamentally different from what they encountered even 5 years ago, Dr. Chen explained during one of their technical reviews. Adversaries have developed sophisticated capabilities for detecting and jamming our communications, which means we need systems that can adapt faster than they can respond. Sarah's solutions addressed these evolving challenges through innovations that combined technical sophistication with operational simplicity. Her frequency-hopping algorithms were complex enough to confuse enemy signal intelligence efforts, but simple enough that field personnel could use them without extensive technical training. The testing phase of the expanded project required coordination with operational units around the world. Sarah found herself analyzing performance data from SEAL teams training in Arctic conditions, special operations forces conducting exercises in desert environments, and units preparing for deployment to jungle regions where traditional communication systems struggled to function. Each environment presented unique challenges that required modifications to Sarah's basic innovations. Arctic conditions affected battery performance and radio propagation in ways that needed to be compensated by software algorithms. Desert environments created dust and heat problems that required different solutions. Jungle conditions introduced humidity and vegetation interference that demanded their own technical responses. The beauty of your approach is its adaptability, Chief Park noted as they reviewed test results from multiple environments. Instead of developing different systems for different conditions, you've created a framework that can be optimized for specific requirements while maintaining common operational procedures. As the project progressed, Sarah began to understand the broader implications of her work. The communication improvements she was developing would affect not just American Special Operations Forces, but allied units that used compatible equipment and procedures. Her innovations would influence military communication technology for years to come, affecting thousands of personnel and countless missions. The personal relationships she had developed during her initial assignment continued to evolve as the project expanded. Harrison remained a key collaborator, but their working relationship had deepened into a professional partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. Chief Park had become not just a colleague but a mentor, someone whose operational experience helped Sarah understand the human dimension of the technical problems she was solving. His insights into how communication failures affected morale and mission effectiveness influenced her design decisions in ways that pure technical analysis might have missed. The expanded project also brought new recognition for Sarah's contributions. Technical journals published articles about her communication innovations, and she was invited to speak at conferences where military and civilian experts shared ideas about emerging technologies. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the field personnel who used her equipment. Reports from deployed units consistently praised the reliability and effectiveness of the improved communication systems, and several mission commanders specifically noted how the enhanced capabilities had contributed to successful operations. Master Chief Williams, whose team had been the first to benefit from Sarah's emergency fix, sent a personal message that Sarah treasured. "Ms. Martinez, your communication improvements have given us capabilities we didn't know we needed until we had them. Outstanding work that makes a real difference for those of us operating in harm's way." As her first year on the base drew to a close, Sarah realized that her temporary assignment had evolved into something much more significant. She wasn't just a contractor hired to solve specific technical problems. She had become part of a community dedicated to developing capabilities that enhanced American national security and protected the lives of military personnel around the world. Sarah's second year on the base began. The professional relationships she had developed started to evolve into deeper personal connections that challenged her understanding of military culture and her own place within it. The intensity of working on projects where lives depended on technical excellence had created bonds that went beyond typical workplace relationships. Harrison had become more than just a military liaison for her projects. Their countless hours of collaboration had revealed shared values and perspectives that transcended their different backgrounds. Where Sarah brought technical innovation and problem-solving creativity, Harrison provided operational wisdom and leadership experience that complemented her skills perfectly. Their working relationship had developed a rhythm of mutual respect and intellectual challenge that both found professionally satisfying and personally engaging. Harrison's questions about technical capabilities weren't just operational requirements. They reflected a genuine interest in understanding how technology could enhance human performance and safety. "Your communication systems are changing how we think about special operations coordination," Harrison told Sarah during one of their regular project reviews. "But I'm curious about your long-term vision. Where do you see military communication technology going in the next decade?" Sarah appreciated the depth of Harrison's thinking. Unlike many military officers she had worked with, who focused primarily on immediate operational needs, Harrison understood the strategic implications of technological advancement and the importance of planning for future challenges. "I think we're moving toward communication systems that are more like artificial intelligence assistants than traditional radios," Sarah replied, sketching concepts on the whiteboard in her office. "Systems that can anticipate communication needs, automatically optimize performance based on environmental conditions, and provide decision support for operators in complex situations." These conversations had become highlights of Sarah's work week, opportunities to explore ideas that went beyond immediate project requirements to consider the broader future of military technology. Harrison's operational experience provided reality checks for her more ambitious concepts, while her technical expertise challenged him to think beyond current limitations. Chief Park had also become a close friend and mentor, someone whose cultural perspective and military experience helped Sarah navigate the complexities of working within the defense establishment. His journey from the son of Korean immigrants to a senior enlisted technician in special operations provided insights into the diverse paths that led people to military service. "My parents still ask when I'm going to get a real job in the civilian world," Chief Park confided during one of their late-night testing sessions. "They understand that I'm successful, but the military lifestyle is foreign to their experience as immigrants who focused on economic stability and conventional career paths." Sarah found these conversations valuable for understanding the personal sacrifices that military service required. Chief Park's dedication to his work wasn't just professional obligation. It reflected a deep commitment to serving a country that had provided opportunities for his family, even when that service required separation from loved ones and deployment to dangerous locations. The expanded communication project had also brought Sarah into contact with military families, particularly through social events and community activities on the base. She discovered a supportive network of spouses and children who understood the unique challenges of military life and had developed strategies for maintaining family relationships despite the demands of military service. Captain Walsh's wife, Maria, had become an informal mentor for Sarah, helping her understand the social dynamics of military communities and the unwritten rules that governed relationships between military personnel and civilian contractors. The military can feel like a closed community to outsiders, Maria explained during a base social event. But once you're accepted, you become part of an extended family that will support you anywhere in the world. Sarah was beginning to understand this dynamic through her own experience. The initial skepticism she had encountered as a civilian contractor had given way to acceptance and respect based on her professional contributions and personal character. She was no longer an outsider being tolerated. She was a valued member of a community dedicated to important work. The incident with Rodriguez had become a distant memory, replaced by countless positive interactions that demonstrated the base's commitment to creating a professional environment where everyone could contribute effectively. Sarah occasionally encountered Rodriguez in passing, and their interactions were politely professional, reflecting the healing that had occurred for both individuals. Involved in the original conflict, Rodriguez had been assigned to a logistics position where his attention to detail and security consciousness were valuable assets without requiring direct interaction with civilian contractors. Reports suggested that he was performing well in his new role and had received counseling that helped him understand the appropriate boundaries for security procedures. Dr. Foster, the base psychologist, had occasionally checked on Sarah's adjustment to military culture, and these conversations had helped Sarah understand her own evolving perspective on military service and the people who chose this demanding career path. You've become an advocate for the military community, Dr. Foster observed during one of their informal conversations. Your technical work is obviously important, but your presence here has also helped bridge understanding between civilian and military cultures. Sarah hadn't consciously set out to become a cultural ambassador, but she realized that her experience as a civilian contractor working closely with military personnel had given her unique insights into both communities. She found herself explaining military culture to civilian friends and family, helping them understand the dedication and professionalism of the military personnel she worked with daily. Her relationship with Harrison had evolved to include personal conversations that revealed the human dimension behind his professional competence. She learned about his childhood in rural Montana, his decision to join the Navy after losing a close friend in the September 11th attacks, and the personal cost of a career that required frequent deployments and constant readiness for dangerous missions. People assume that military service is about following orders and avoiding independent thought. Harrison told her during a conversation that stretched long into the evening. But the reality is that military personnel, especially in special operations, need to make complex decisions under extreme pressure, often with incomplete information and lives hanging in the balance. Sarah was gaining appreciation for the intellectual and emotional demands of military leadership. Harrison's calm competence under pressure wasn't just natural talent. It reflected years of training and experience that had prepared him to make difficult decisions when failure could have catastrophic consequences. The decision that would define Sarah's future came unexpectedly, triggered by a late-night phone call that changed everything she thought she knew about her role in the military community. Harrison's voice carried an urgency that immediately commanded her attention, even though she was exhausted from another long day of testing communication protocols. Sarah, I need to ask something of you that goes beyond your contract obligations, Harrison said, his words careful and measured. We have a situation developing that requires your specific expertise, but participating would mean deploying with an operational team to a location I can't discuss over the phone. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she processed the implications of Harrison's request. In 2 years of working on the base, she had always been safely removed from the operational realities that gave meaning to her technical work. The possibility of deploying with a SEAL team represented a crossing of boundaries she had never imagined. "Jake, I'm a civilian contractor, not military personnel. I don't have the training or clearances for that kind of assignment," she replied, using his first name for the first time in their professional relationship. "The situation requires real-time technical support that can't be provided remotely," Harrison explained. "Your communication systems are working perfectly, but the environmental conditions are creating interference patterns that need immediate modification. You're the only person who understands the code well enough to implement changes in the field." Captain Walsh had authorized the request, Harrison continued, and Admiral Reynolds had personally approved the exceptional deployment of a civilian contractor with an operational unit. Sarah would receive accelerated training in basic field procedures and would be protected by personnel whose primary mission would be her safety. But the risks were real and significant. Sarah stared out the window of her quarters at the base she had come to think of as home, trying to process a decision that would either represent the culmination of her professional development or a dangerous step beyond her capabilities and comfort zone. "How much time do I have to decide?" she asked, already knowing that the urgency in Harrison's voice meant time was a luxury they didn't have. 12 hours. "We deploy tomorrow evening." The night that followed was the longest of Sarah's life. She walked the familiar paths of the base, past buildings where she had worked for 2 years developing technology that was now so critical to a mission that her personal involvement was deemed necessary. The weight of trust placed in her by the military community was both humbling and terrifying. Chief Park found her in the communications lab at 3 a.m, staring at lines of code that represented months of her work, and potentially the difference between mission success and failure for the team that would deploy in less than 18 hours. "Can't sleep either?" Chief Park asked, settling into a chair beside her workstation. "Dave, am I crazy to even consider this?" Sarah asked, appreciating the presence of someone whose judgment she trusted completely. Chief Park was quiet for a long moment, understanding that his answer would influence a decision that could affect not just Sarah's career, but potentially her life. 2 years ago, you came here as a contractor hired to upgrade some communication equipment, he finally said. But you've become something more important than that. You've become someone the special operations community trusts with their lives. That's not something that happens by accident. Sarah looked at the technical specifications spread across her desk, seeing them not as abstract engineering challenges, but as tools that would be used by people she cared about in situations where failure could have permanent consequences. "The mission requires technical expertise that only you possess," Chief Park continued. "But more than that, it requires someone the team trusts to make the right decisions under pressure." Harrison wouldn't have asked if he didn't believe you could handle both the technical and personal challenges. As dawn approached, Sarah realized that her decision had been made gradually over the past 2 years through countless interactions that had transformed her from an outsider performing contract work to a trusted member of a community dedicated to protecting American interests around the world. She found Harrison in the Mission Planning Center, surrounded by maps and intelligence reports that painted a picture of the challenges the team would face. He looked up as she entered, his expression showing both hope and concern about the decision she had reached. "I'll go," Sarah said simply, "but I need to understand exactly what I'm committing to." The briefing that followed revealed a mission that was both simpler and more complex than Sarah had imagined. A SEAL team was conducting operations in a remote location where communication with headquarters was essential for coordinating with other military units and ensuring safe extraction when the mission was complete. The environmental conditions in the target area were creating interference patterns that her communication systems couldn't compensate for automatically. Real-time analysis and code modification would be required to maintain reliable contact, and Sarah was the only person with sufficient understanding of the systems to perform those modifications under field conditions. "Your role will be purely technical," Harrison emphasized. "You'll remain in a secure location with communication equipment while the operational team conducts their mission. But you need to understand that being in the field, even in a support role, involves risks that we can minimize but can't eliminate entirely." The accelerated training Sarah received over the next 8 hours was intense and focused, covering basic field procedures, emergency protocols, and the specific equipment she would use to support the mission. She learned to operate communication systems under conditions that were far removed from the controlled environment of her laboratory. Master Chief Williams, whose team had been the first to benefit from Sarah's emergency communication fix, was assigned as her primary protector and liaison with the operational team. His presence provided both professional reassurance and personal comfort as Sarah prepared for an experience that would test everything she had learned about military culture and her own capabilities. "Ma'am, my job is to ensure you can focus on the technical work without worrying about anything else," Master Chief Williams explained during their pre-deployment briefing. "The team understands how important your contribution is to mission success, and will make sure you have everything you need to do your job effectively." As the deployment time approached, Sarah found herself saying goodbye to the base community that had become her professional and personal home. Dr. Foster offered final words of encouragement about her ability to handle the psychological challenges of field deployment. Captain Walsh expressed confidence in her technical abilities and personal character. Admiral Reynolds sent a personal message emphasizing the importance of her contribution to a mission that served vital national security interests. But the most meaningful farewell came from Chief Park, whose friendship and mentorship had been instrumental in Sarah's development. From a civilian contractor to a trusted member of the Special Operations community, "You've already proven everything you need to prove," Chief Park told her as they stood together outside the communications lab where they had spent countless hours developing and testing innovations that were now operational standards throughout the Special Operations community. "This deployment is just the next step in a journey that started when you chose to stand up for your professional dignity and personal worth." As Sarah boarded the aircraft that would take her to a destination she couldn't name for a mission she couldn't discuss, she reflected on the transformation that had brought her to this moment. 2 years earlier, she had been a civilian engineer uncomfortable with military culture and uncertain about her place in a community she didn't understand. Now she was deploying with a SEAL team as a trusted technical expert whose innovations had enhanced the capabilities of special operations forces around the world. The incident with Rodriguez that had once seemed like a career-ending disaster had instead become the foundation for relationships and experiences that had given her life meaning and purpose beyond anything she had imagined possible. Harrison was on the same aircraft, reviewing mission plans and coordinating with headquarters about the operational timeline. When he looked up from his briefing materials and caught Sarah's eye, his expression conveyed both professional confidence in her abilities and personal concern for her safety. "Ready for this?" he asked, his question encompassing both the immediate technical challenges and the broader implications of a decision that had committed her to sharing the risks and responsibilities of the military community she had come to call home. Sarah looked out the aircraft window at the lights of the base disappearing below them, then turned back to Harrison with a smile that reflected both determination and peace with her choice. "I've been ready for this for longer than I realized," she replied, understanding that her answer applied not just to the mission ahead, but to the life she had chosen and the community she was proud to serve.